In Romans 1:16, Paul writes about preaching the gospel first to the Jews and then to the Gentiles. Is that just a suggestion, or is there actually people who are taking that seriously today? Well, we're going to talk about that today. Hi, my name is Cody Archer. I want to welcome you to this week's Revive Live. I'm so glad that you're joining us. And as always, I'd love to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Go ahead and write in the comments below. We love to connect with people from all around the world. And I also want to remind you that every week here at Revive Israel, we have an email update that gets sent out to people all around the world. It's translated in many different languages, and it's going to bless you. If you have not signed up to receive it, I want to encourage you today to go ahead and do that. Go to reviveisrael.org and scroll down on our homepage. There'll be a place where you can subscribe to our weekly email update, to our videos, to our blog teachings, updates of what's happening here in the land of Israel, and I know it'll bless you. And one other thing with that, we have a team of over 80 volunteer translators all around the world, and we're always wanting to grow that, to expand into new languages. And if you have two different languages, English and your mother tongue, if you are skilled or have an interest in translation, we would love to connect with you and have you join one of the teams of translators, and that we together can reach your people in your mother tongue with good news coming out of Israel. So if that interests you, go also to our website and go to the Connect page, and there'll be a place where you can connect with us. Well, today I have a friend of mine from America. His name is Troy Wallace. Troy, so great to have you with me today.
It's great to be here, Cody. For sure.
And Troy, you're a father of three. You're married to a Jewish woman.
I am.
And you actually have a very unique connection to our team through your parents.
I do.
And we want to hear about that today. So let's give us a little bit family history.
A little family history. That's
yes.
Jewish geography, as they say. Well, my folks got involved with the In-Traders when they were still back in the States. So we had a pastor that we knew in common because of a fellowship of pastors in the D.C. area that were connected to the Messianic Jewish movement. So Dan and Asher were a part of a fellowship group, and we were going to a church of a pastor, and then we moved to a different town. And that happened to be the same town that the In-Traders moved to start a new Messianic congregation out of the Beth Messiah work closer to D.C. And so we had moved to this town and tried to find a church to plug into. I think we moved when I was 8. For a year, we tried to find a place to plug in, and then we got a cold call from Asher, actually.
Wow.
He got our phone number from this pastor that we knew in common, and he said, hey, I'm starting a new Messianic Jewish congregation, and I'd love for you to be a part of it. And my mom, in my classic mom style, and I know you know my mom, said,
yes.
Well, we're not Jews, so what do you offer on Sundays? And at the time, the pattern of the congregation meeting was Erev Shabbat, and then a Sunday morning home fellowship.
Wait, Erev Shabbat is a Friday night for
service.
Those that don't know what that is.
Yeah. So it was a Friday night service, and then they had a Sunday morning home fellowship. So our family plugged into that right away. I was 9. I loved it. I mean, we went to the Friday night service, and people were dancing, and you took your shoes off, and it was just like totally a different experience for me. So that's how we got introduced to the In-Traders, and that was right at the beginning of the congregational work that they planted in the U.S. And that congregational work was part of a single congregation, Beth Messiah in the D.C. area, becoming 4 or 5 congregations, and was kind of the seed of Tikkun. What we know now as Tikkun Global was Tikkun America, was immediately an apostolic grouping because one congregation became 4 or 5. And our congregation was a part of that. And so I was 9 and got involved since that time. My family was there right at the beginning of the congregation.
Yes,
and,
amazing. And then you would have been there also when the traders, Asher and his family, were sent to Israel.
Yes.
And I'm actually not clear on this. Is that the time where you actually started getting involved with our team, or the founding and some of the things of Revive Israel?
Actually, I would have to defer that to my folks. So my mom was involved in the congregation right away. My dad actually took on the treasurer role in '86, I think, and he held that role until 2016.
What
in the same congregation.
What a
it's
faithful
crazy.
Man!
Right, totally.
Yes, and he still is.
Yeah, he
Your
is.
parents are amazing.
They moved out of that area now after I left, which is another part of the story. But so my mom stayed connected and helped facilitate things in the U.S. immediately after the In-Traders left. So I was. Gosh, they left, I must have been 15, 16. So I wasn't involved right away in the ministry. And then I went to college and had my build a testimony years, and et cetera, et cetera. So I got involved a little bit later, actually.
That's good.
Yeah.
So then you actually did get involved with Revive Israel for a season.
I did.
And what were you doing at that time?
So I actually have a master's in civil engineering and was pursuing, I was on faculty at Virginia Tech for a year, came and worked for the local municipality, and I got into ministry because I kind of had a vision of my life. I was working a very entry-level job with the county, and the county engineer found my resume, found my educational certifications, all that, and came to me and said, hey, I've been holding this engineering job open for 2 years, waiting for the right person to come along. You're the right person.
Wow.
I'll double your salary next week, and this could be the job that you take all the way until your retirement years.
Wow.
And so I was pretty shocked, like that's a great idea.
Yeah.
But I had this kind of vision of my life unfolding, and I was going to take this career job, get a car payment, a house payment, wife, kids.
American dream.
Yeah, and I'd never really taken the time to pursue ministry.
Wow.
So instead of taking that job, I quit my job with the county, cashed out my retirement, and went to Kansas City to the International House of Prayer and took an internship there.
Wow.
That was kind of my move into ministry life.
Interesting.
And when I went to Kansas City, I didn't want to get lost, if I can say it that way, in the charismatic church world. So I made sure to connect with a local Messianic congregation through that process. And someone you know, I think, Evan Levine, and I met very quickly.
Yeah.
In my college years, I came to Israel for the first time on Taglit as a non-Jew. Very interesting story, but I'll say that for another time.
Yes.
And so Evan had just gotten back from Taglit, and the congregation, they showed like a little video of their trip.
Yeah.
And so that just helped us to connect right away. And the Messianic congregation there was starting a youth ministry. And so Evan and I was involved in helping Evan to start that youth ministry, and 3 kids became 50 kids. And then we did the same thing in Colorado later, which is another story. So that's my story into ministry.
Yes.
And when I came back to Maryland in 2007, it was to serve as an intern at the congregation that the Intraders planted.
Which you eventually moved into the leadership team there.
I did. So when I moved there in 2007, I stayed with the congregation for 8 years. And in 2009, the team here invited me to be a part of the team on the U.S. side. So that's how I had an intimate connection with Revive Israel. Not just because of my historic relationship with the Intraders, but actually taking on an active role.
And you're a huge blessing to our team and continue to be. And for the sake of time.
There's a lot of family history there.
Yeah, let's fast forward. You spent a season serving with the ministry Revive Israel, but then you got an invitation from Jonathan Burness from the ministry Jewish Voice.
Right, Jewish Voice.
And you ended up moving to Phoenix, Arizona.
Our headquarters is in Phoenix, even though we serve many communities all around the world, and that was just about 4 years ago.
Okay. So for those people or people around the world that maybe don't know Jewish Voice or Jonathan Burness, give us a little background.
So a little history on Jewish Voice. Actually, Jewish Voice was founded in 1967.
Really?
1 month, 2 months, forget the timeline, but right before the 67 war here.
Interesting.
Lewis Kaplan, a Jewish evangelist out of the Assemblies of God. He was a healing evangelist, like ran around with Oral Roberts type of folks in that era. Got a word from the Lord. Hey, minister to your own people. And he had left home when he was 18. He actually, when he became a believer, his parents booted him out of the house. And the Lord just put it on his heart to start to reach out to the Jewish people via radio. So Jewish Voice Broadcast was born in 1967.
Wow.
Did some work here in Israel, very limited evangelistic work, but mostly it was a media ministry.
Okay.
Eventually got into television, and then in the early 90s, a guy that leads Jewish Voice now, Rabbi Jonathan Burness, started doing a work in the former Soviet Union, Eastern Europe. After the Iron Curtain fell, there was all these Jewish people that kind of had grown up without their identity as Jews under communism. But when the wall fell, it was like a gospel opportunity.
Wow,
I mean, Jonathan talks about when he was doing a festival there, and he did an altar call. almost entirely Jewish people. Of an audience was maybe 4,000. He did an altar call for people who want to accept the Lord, and like 2,200 people raised their hands.
Wow.
And he was like, no. Do you understand what I'm asking you to do?
Amazing.
And they all came up to the front, and like
wow.
there was mobs for people to get Bibles. I mean, just an amazing work. And
wow.
that was a big deal in the Messianic community in the early 90s. I mean, even the congregational grouping in D.C. was sending people to the work that Jonathan was doing.
Wow, that's powerful.
And that was under a different moniker at the time, Hero Israel Ministries.
Okay.
And eventually Hero Israel and Jewish Voice Broadcasts came together as one ministry in about 1999.
Wow. So the more that I get to know the ministry of the Jewish Voice, this verse that I mentioned in the beginning of preaching the gospel first to the Jew, then to the Gentile, you guys don't look at that as some suggestion that Paul gave 2,000 years ago. You guys actually literally believe that that is the scriptural pattern of outreach.
Well,
so unpack that a little bit.
Actually, the beginning of the verse says it's the power of salvation to all men, to the Jew first and to the Gentile also. So when we're going to the Jew first and the Gentile, there's not only an order or priority, but we have an expectation for power and salvation to be released as we follow that pattern.
Yeah.
So agree with you that it's not a suggestion. Actually, for us, that's part of our whole mission statement. Is we proclaim the gospel to the Jew first, build the Messianic Jewish community, and engage the church concerning Israel and the Jewish people. So that is a framework for us that we take all over the world.
Amazing.
And it began really with Jonathan's work in the 90s in the former Soviet Union.
And as far as I know, Jewish Voice today is the largest Messianic Jewish ministry in all of America.
Maybe we could say the world.
Maybe
I'm not saying that for our own trumpeting.
That's very true. So unpack a little bit now. What is your role at Jewish Voice, and what are some of the things you're leading?
I'll just start with my title. My title is Vice President of Congregation and Leadership Development, which is a lot of words. But basically, what I'm responsible for is we do outreaches. And I'll talk about that maybe in a minute. And those outreaches are not just for confessions of Yeshua, and we do great work so that people are built up in their lives. But then hopefully those believers will plug in either to a local church or into a Messianic Jewish congregation that we help indigenous leaders plant as a byproduct of our outreaches. So my main responsibility is to oversee the congregations that we've helped to plant over the years.
Wow. In America, or where are we talking?
Actually, Jewish Voice doesn't have any congregations in America. There's the historic congregation that Jonathan planted in the 80s when he was first a believer.
Okay.
But we don't do a lot of work in America.
It's all international. Wow. So,
what
are some of the countries that you guys are involved in?
So from Jonathan's work in the 90s, there's about 30 historic, this is the way I describe it, historic relationships of congregations that Jonathan helped to plant out of that initial work.
Wow.
They have indigenous leaders as of this time and are related to us in relationship, not necessarily formally.
In Eastern Europe primarily?
Yes, Ukraine is one place. There's still some things in Russia that have survived. Belarus. So there's a few in that area. Again, about 30 in a little network that's self-contained. And then in the late 90s, the early part of 2000, the work in the former Soviet Union started to slow down, and God opened a door for us, actually into Africa. And you might say, or some of your viewers might say, Africa, what does that have to do with the Jewish people? Well, there's communities in Africa, for our work, primarily in Ethiopia and Zimbabwe, that have a historic Israelite identity connected to the dispersion at Assyria and then also at Babylon. So the historic dispersion of people, many people came into Africa, kind of married in with some of the indigenous peoples of Africa, and yet they maintained an Israelite identity. Now I'm being very specific in the language here, Cody, because it's not a Jewish identity in the way that we might think of kind of a Western or European Judaism. It's not even an Eastern Judaism like the Mizrahi and the Sephardim in that way. This is an identity that is based in the text based in the history of Israel, but not framed by the rabbis.
Interesting.
So it's a very interesting historical.
So it's more of like an inner thing than it is an outer thing.
Well,
in
they
some
still
ways,
maintain
okay.
many of the scriptural traditions, if I can
Okay.
say it that way.
Yes.
They circumcise their sons. They only eat meat that's slaughtered according to some of what Moses
Yes.
tells us. Now the rabbis expand on that.
Yes.
So it's very interesting the way that they
Interesting.
treat the community, the way
Yeah.
they treat women, and the cycles of women, things like that
Wow.
are written in the Bible.
So then you guys' focus on the Jewish people in Africa, is
Right.
this then connected to Queen Sheba coming up?
It is.
visiting?
Actually, the Ethiopian Jewish community ties its roots to, it says in the text that the Queen of Sheba came up to see Solomon and he gave her all that she wanted. And so, including
Not
a
just
son.
material goods.
Right, including a son. And so that son actually became the founder of, in the kingdom of Abyssinia, or in the text of the Bible it might say Cush, became the founder of a dynasty of kings that were descended from Solomon. And there was a religious Jewish expression. I mean, again, we might say it's the religion of the Israelites at the time, because it wasn't Judaism as we know it today.
Wow.
And actually, just interesting fact,
Yeah.
Haile Selassie was a figure in the 60s who was deposed as the last king of Ethiopia. But he claimed his parentage back to the descendant of Solomon.
Wow.
So in some ways, Ethiopia had a 3,000-year Davidic dynasty that ruled over that nation. So very
Interesting.
interesting.
That
And if
is
you
what-
look
I've
at
never
the
heard that.
history of Africa itself, Abyssinia was the kingdom of the continent in many ways.
Yes.
So anyways, and also the only country, Ethiopia, the only country on the continent of Africa that was never successfully colonized in the modern era, which is also interesting.
Yes, okay.
So that was a
So-
lot of words.
Yes.
But the Beta Israel is the main group in Ethiopia that claim their descendancy from the children of Israel. Beta Israel means the house of Israel.
Yes. Okay. So then your role, from what I'm understanding, is you guys are raising funds primarily in
Yes.
America,
That's right.
using those funds to partner with locals on the ground in Africa to plant congregations, preach the gospel, first to Jewish people and then to the Gentiles.
That's correct. And so our outreach model is primarily in Africa built around a humanitarian aid model. So we go in and put together usually a 5 working day clinic. It's 4 full days and 2 half days on the end. We go, what motivates us to go to a geographic area is whether or not there's a Jewish community there.
Okay.
So that's our to the Jew first.
Yes.
That's how we decide where we're going to go. We put on this 5-day clinic to try to earn the right by giving something good in the name of Jesus, earn the right then to share the gospel.
Okay.
So people are offered the opportunity to receive prayer at the end. Those who receive prayer and say yes to the Messiah, we have them fill out a card, and then those cards become follow-up opportunities for local leaders.
Okay. Wow.
And
So what kind of numbers are we talking of Jewish believers in some of these countries that you guys are working in?
So let me talk to you about, I mean, most people know, certainly in Israel, that the Jewish community of Ethiopia was accepted or recognized as an official Jewish community in the 80s and 90s, and there were the 2 big Ethiopian Aliyah. So those who are left behind, there are many who still are ostracized because they're part of the Beta Israel. That number, man, there's a lot of debate on the number, but I feel comfortable to say there's about 100,000 who still fall into that category. Amazing. Now, Israel doesn't recognize them as fully Jewish because they converted to Orthodox Christianity, usually under some kind of persecution and pressure, but that conversion was enough for the state of Israel not to recognize their Aliyah status. So that leaves us with kind of a fertile ground. And we've been going there since 1999, and today there are 25 Messianic Jewish congregations in Ethiopia that we have helped to at least get started. There's 3 different networks actually, Cody, because it's a little more complicated. There's 3 different ethnic groups among the Jewish community in Ethiopia. So one of them even has a different language than the other 2. And so though they have their own networks, there's some amount of national unity. And so I can say glory to God, and really Jonathan's the pioneer of, but Jewish Voice been able to see an entire national movement of congregations in Ethiopia.
Wow.
Kind of start from nothing.
That's exciting.
And they work alongside of the local
Yes.
church. Some people who come into the Messianic congregations in Ethiopia are from a Jewish background or from a Beta Israel background and looking to renew their identity,
Wow.
even though they're
Now-
already believers in Jesus. So
Wow,
it's exciting.
that's great. And now you guys actually take teams and trips to Africa and many different places on a regular basis. Is
Right.
this open to other people to join you guys?
Absolutely.
So how, if someone's interested, their heart's burning for Africa, I want to reach Jewish people in Africa,
Right.
how could they do that?
www.jewishvoice.org, and at I think on the top of the page it says go. And so if
Okay.
you click on go, then there's
Yes.
the dates of this year's outreaches. In fact, just what's today? 3 or 4 days ago, we finished our first outreach of the year, where we were in Ambo Meda, Ethiopia, serving the Beta Abraham community.
Wow.
The Beta Abraham is a
Yes.
spin-off kind of the Beta Israel.
Okay.
And we served 18,000 patients. Actually, it was
Wow.
17,870 something.
Amazing.
Patients in 5 days. And we got
Wow.
the chance to pray with, I would say, probably about 1,000. But our team, because of some changes in the Ethiopian law, actually decided to take our more formal praying outreach out into the villages. So instead of just waiting for people to come to a central location, our team went out with some water purification devices, actually, and used that as an opportunity to gather the village, show them how to drink clean water from these little devices that we give out, and then the opportunity to preach the
Wow,
gospel.
that's awesome.
So it's super fun.
So good. Well,
Very
Troy,
unique.
we're out of time. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Absolutely. Thank you for
And
having
I
me.
want to encourage you guys that are watching today to go and check out the website of Jewish Voice. It's again jewishvoice.org.
.org.
And they have lots of great content. Jonathan also has his own show that is powerful. He has great guests that he interviews. They have so many other books and resources, and connect with them. And also, we love the partnership that we share with Jewish Voice here at Revive Israel. We have relationships. Also, there's financial blessing between these ministries. We love them and want to ask you to be praying for the Jewish Voice ministry as well. They're advancing Yeshua's kingdom, not just in Africa or in America, but in many other places, and we love them and support them, and we want you guys to do that as well. Well, thank you so much for joining this episode, this broadcast of Revive Live. Again, let us know where you're watching from. Go ahead and share and like this broadcast, and I will see you next week on Revive Live.